All right, let's jump right in. We are about to go on a journey through 2 full centuries of scientific history to really unpack the story behind one of the single greatest achievements in all of public health, vaccination. It's a pretty incredible story of progress, of millions of lives saved, and honestly, a fundamental shift in the way we all live. And to really get just how profound that shift was, we've got to start here. This number, 47. That was the average life expectancy in the United States back in the year 1900. Think about that. It's a stark reminder of a world where life was just so much more fragile and a whole lot shorter than it is for most of us today. So what happened? What was the big breakthrough that helped us gain, on average, an extra 30 years of life over the next century? Now, there are a lot of factors, of course, but a huge, huge piece of that answer is the story we're about to explore. To see just how much the world was transformed, we need to understand what the biggest killers were a century ago. It wasn't cancer or heart disease like we think of today. No, it was infectious diseases. And the change? Well, it was absolutely staggering. This one really shows the immense human cost of that era. In 1900, nearly 1/3 of all deaths in the US were children under the age of 5. That's a reality that's almost unimaginable for us now, and it was driven by diseases we can now prevent. Things like diphtheria, measles, and whooping cough. So how did this whole thing even begin? Well, the idea didn't just pop out of a modern, sterile lab. It started with careful observation, some really bold experimentation, and a few, let's just say, very risky early attempts to fight back against one of history's most feared diseases, smallpox. What's so fascinating here is how the idea grew over time. It actually started centuries ago over in Asia with something called variolation. And get this, they used actual material from smallpox sores to try and cause a milder infection. Then you have guys like Benjamin Jesty, a farmer who noticed that milkmaids who got a mild disease called cowpox didn't seem to get smallpox, so he bravely inoculated his own family. This observation led to Edward Jenner's more systematic experiments, which gave us the word vaccine. It comes from vacca, the Latin word for cow. And then, finally, the legendary Louis Pasteur brings it all into the lab, creating the scientific principle: isolate, inactivate, and inject that would guide vaccine development for the next 100 years. This quote really just nails the spirit of these pioneers. They were driven by this relentless desire to find a way, any way at all, to stop the devastation caused by these invisible enemies. It was a centuries-long quest for a real solution. And that solution, once they found it, it changed everything. The 20th century became this golden age of vaccinology. One after another, humanity's deadliest diseases were finally brought under some control. The results were, well, they were nothing short of a revolution. I mean, just look at polio. This was a disease that paralyzed hundreds of thousands of people, mostly kids, every single year. In 1988, there were an estimated 350,000 cases. After decades of global vaccination efforts, just six cases were reported in 2021. That is an almost complete victory. Or take measles. Before 1980, it was responsible for an estimated 2.6 million deaths every year. The introduction of that vaccine saved millions and millions of lives, as you can see, just dramatically reducing that number. Every single one of those prevented deaths is a life that got to be lived. So here's the bottom line. When you look at 13 of the most common vaccine-preventable diseases in the United States, the introduction of vaccination programs led to a greater than 90% reduction in cases. It is, without a doubt, one of the most effective public health interventions in all of human history. Okay, but how does it actually work? I mean, how can exposing your body to a piece of a germ make you stronger? The simplest way to think about it is like a training exercise, a really specific, targeted boot camp for your immune system. So at its core, a vaccine is basically a biological product that trains your immune system. It introduces a safe version of a threat, or maybe just a tiny piece of it, so your body can learn how to recognize it and fight it off, without you ever having to get sick from the actual disease. And this training follows a pretty clear 4-step process. First, the vaccine introduces an antigen, that's a molecule from the pathogen. This wakes up your immune system's first responders. They then train the specialist troops, your T cells and B cells, to identify the enemy. But the most critical part is the final step. Your body creates these long-lasting memory cells. Think of them as the veterans of the training exercise, just waiting, ready to spring into action instantly if the real pathogen ever shows up. For most of the 20th century, we really relied on two main strategies. Live attenuated vaccines use a weakened or kind of tamed version of the virus, which gives your body a really strong and long-lasting immune response. Then you have inactivated vaccines, which use a killed version of the pathogen. It can't cause the disease at all, which makes it extremely safe, though you might need booster shots down the road to keep that memory strong. But today, the technology has just leaped forward. Subunit vaccines are even more precise. They use just one specific protein or piece of the bad guy. And the newest platforms, like nucleic acid and vector vaccines, they're truly revolutionary. Instead of injecting the antigen itself, they give your body the genetic recipe to make its own. Your own cells become these tiny temporary vaccine factories, training your immune system from the inside out. It's amazing stuff. This incredible scientific progress is still happening. We have smarter, faster ways to make vaccines than ever before in history. And yet, this progress has always been met with a parallel story, one of fear, misunderstanding, and social pushback.
Yeah, vaccine hesitancy is not some new phenomenon. Back in the 18th century, people were genuinely afraid Jenner's vaccine would make them sprout cow-like features. In the 19th century, mandatory vaccination laws sparked huge protests about personal freedom. In the 20th century, fears popped up about vaccine side effects. And today, in the 21st century, the big challenge is the infodemic, the lightning-fast spread of misinformation online. The specific fears change, but that pattern of hesitancy, it remains.
But even as these social challenges continue, the science does not stop. Just last year, after decades of setbacks and painstaking research, the first ever vaccines for RSV were finally approved. This is a massive breakthrough that's going to protect infants and older adults, and it just proves that persistent search for solutions is still very much alive and well. And, that really leaves us with the central question for our time. We know how to train an immune system to fight a virus, but as the technology gets more and more advanced, the bigger challenge might just be this: how do we make sure that public trust can keep pace with scientific progress?